All right. Welcome back to the deep dive. You ready to get into it?
Oh, absolutely. Always ready for a deep dive, especially with one like this.
Yeah, this is a big one that I know a lot of you have been requesting for a while now. So let's talk JonBenét Ramsey.
Oh yeah, this case, it's a tough one.
Yeah, it really is. And we've got a ton of stuff that you guys have sent in on this. Articles, documentaries, the whole nine yards. So we're going to be going through all of it, trying to make sense of this case together.
I think what always gets me is just how many twists and turns there are. You think you're going one way and then bam, something completely throws you off.
Right. It's like you said, every time you think you have a grasp on it, some new detail pops up and you're back to square one.
Yeah.
So for those who maybe haven't spent as much time on this case, let's start from the beginning. Christmas, 1996, Boulder, Colorado. The picture-perfect Ramsey family. Or so it seemed.
Right, you've got John and Patsy, their 9-year-old son, Burke, and of course, 6-year-old JonBenét, a family celebrating the holidays until, well, everything changes the next morning.
And it changes with that ransom note.
Oh, the ransom note. Now, that's where things get really interesting. I mean, on the surface, it screams kidnapping, right? But there's so many things that just don't add up about it.
It's weird right from the start. It's like super long, 2.5 pages. Who does that?
Exactly. And then there's that super specific amount of money they demand, $118,000. Turns out that was the exact same amount as John Ramsey's Christmas bonus. Makes you wonder, was that just a coincidence?
It's hard to believe it was.
Hmm.
And then the fact that it was written on paper from the Ramsey's house. Not some note brought in from outside. I mean, come on.
Right. So either you've got this elaborate kidnapping scheme going on, or, well, there are other possibilities we'll get into.
Definitely. So Patsy finds this note and she immediately calls 911. Panicked, of course. But from there, it feels like the investigation just went off the rails.
It's almost unbelievable, really. You've got friends and family coming and going from the house. The crime scene isn't secured properly.
Yeah, I mean, reading through these police reports, it's mind-blowing how many things went wrong in those first few hours.
It really makes you think about how much evidence could have been lost or messed with just because of those mistakes.
And then, on top of all that, you have John Ramsey and a friend finding JonBenét's body in the basement.
In a room that was usually kept locked, no less. I mean, if it was a kidnapping, why would she be in her own house? Why not just take her and go?
It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, does it?
Hmm.
And the way she was found, bound, a garrote around her neck, a head injury, just awful.
It's brutal, and later the autopsy shows she died from strangulation and that skull fracture. But it's more than just the cause of death, it's those other details. Like the fact that she was found in her nightgown. If she was abducted, why dress her back up?
Yeah, that always stuck with me, that little detail. It makes you wonder, was this staged to look a certain way?
Right, and that's where those suspicions about the family being involved start to creep in. And I mean, it's hard to ignore, isn't it?
It really is. You've got the ransom note, the location of the body, the way the scene looked. It definitely raises some red flags. So, when you look at the family involvement theory, what stands out to you?
Well, you've got a range of theories, right? Some people pointed to Patsy maybe losing her temper, others focused on Burke, maybe an accident gone wrong. The media really latched onto those ideas. It was a frenzy.
Oh yeah, I remember. It was everywhere. But, important to remember, the Ramseys always insisted they were innocent.
Absolutely. They always denied any involvement, and they were adamant about that.
And then there's that DNA evidence. In 2008, touch DNA testing cleared the Ramseys, right?
Yep. They found DNA on JonBenét's clothing that didn't match anyone in the family. It belonged to an unknown male.
So that kind of blows the whole family involvement theory out of the water, doesn't it?
It certainly throws a huge wrench in it. And it kind of shifts the focus to this mysterious intruder, someone who managed to get in and out of the house seemingly undetected.
Okay, so let's talk about that. The intruder theory, what makes it seem possible?
Well, they found a boot print near the body that didn't belong to anyone in the family, and there were reports of a basement window being open.
Yeah, we've actually got some photos of that window here. It looks like a possible entry point, especially if it wasn't locked.
It does, doesn't it? But then you wonder, wouldn't the Ramseys have noticed an open window? Especially on a cold December night?
That's a good point. See, that's what I mean about this case. Every answer just seems to lead to more questions.
Exactly, and that's what makes it so frustrating. We've got evidence that seems to point in both directions. Was it someone in the family? Was it this mysterious intruder? It's like we're going in circles. It's almost like Occam's razor got like completely thrown out the window on this one,
Right.
you know? Like usually the simplest answer is the right one, but here it's anything but simple.
It's so true. You try to find that one piece that makes it all click, but it's like There's a missing piece to the puzzle. And then, on top of all that, you've got this whole other theory, the one that suggests, maybe there's something bigger going on here, like a cover-up or something involving powerful people.
Oh, yeah. The conspiracy theory. Always a popular one, especially with a case this baffling. And you can kind of see why people go there, right? I mean, think about it. You've got the investigation messed up from the start. No one ever really brought to justice. And there are just like these weird inconsistencies in the story. So people start thinking, maybe there's more to it than we're being told.
It's like they're trying to fill in the gaps with, well, whatever makes sense to them, right?
Yeah.
But we've got to stick to the facts. And speaking of facts, let's go back to those police missteps for a second. Because those really did have a lasting impact on the whole investigation, didn't they?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's textbook what not to do at a crime scene. You don't let people wander in and out. You secure the area. And you definitely don't let someone move the body. It's like they were almost setting themselves up for failure.
Reading those reports, like, did no one think, hey, maybe we should be a little more careful here? And then, to make matters worse, you've got the grand jury indicting John and Patsy Ramsey in 1999 for child abuse resulting in death. But then, the district attorney decides not to prosecute. It's like whiplash.
Total whiplash. And it just goes to show things aren't always so black and white. The grand jury, they thought there was enough there to go to trial. But the DA, he didn't think they could actually win the case. So no trial, no real resolution, just this huge cloud of uncertainty hanging over everyone.
So frustrating, right? For everyone involved, especially if you believe the Ramseys were guilty. Like, you finally think something's going to happen and then nothing.
It's like hitting a brick wall. And it highlights just how messy these real-life cases can be. It's not like on TV where everything wraps up neatly in an hour. You've got evidence that's open to interpretation, different people seeing things differently, and sometimes, you just don't get the clear-cut answers you're hoping for.
But even with all that, there was still some hope, right? New technologies were emerging that could shed more light on things.
Oh, for sure. Like, remember that touch DNA analysis in 2008? That was huge. That's what officially cleared the Ramseys.
Right, because it showed that there was DNA on JonBenét's clothing that didn't match anyone in the family at all. And suddenly, there's this whole new mystery, this unknown male.
It completely changes the game. You go from zeroing in on the family to, who is this guy? How did his DNA get there? Was he the killer? It's like the case reset itself.
And it becomes this whole new puzzle to solve. So what did they do to try and figure out who this unknown male was?
Well, they started using some pretty advanced techniques, like forensic genealogy, for example.
Okay, break that down for me. Forensic genealogy, what is that?
So it's basically using DNA databases to trace family connections, kind of like building a family tree, but in reverse. You start with the unknown DNA, and you look for matches in these databases, people who are related, even distantly, to whoever left that DNA behind.
So you're looking for, like, cousins, distant relatives, that kind of thing.
Exactly. And by piecing together those family trees, you can narrow down the possibilities and eventually, hopefully, identify who that DNA actually belonged to.
It's amazing the things they can do with DNA now. It's like a whole new level of detective work.
It really is. And you know what? It's actually been super successful in cracking a lot of cold cases. Cases that people thought would never be solved.
So there's hope that it could work in this case, too. That maybe, finally, we'll get some real answers about what happened to JonBenét.
You never know, right? And the good news is, they're not giving up. I mean, just a couple of years ago, in 2021, the Boulder police said they were going back over all the evidence, using these new techniques. And last year, in 2023, they actually handed the whole case over to the Colorado cold case team. Fresh eyes, new perspectives, and all the latest tech.
That's got to give some people hope, right? Knowing that they're still actively working on this, even after all these years.
It does. It shows that this case, it still matters. And it speaks to, like, the power this story has, That even after all this time, people still want answers. They want justice for JonBenét.
It really is amazing how this case just sticks with you, doesn't it? I mean, we started this deep dive talking about how this case has just gripped people for, what, almost 30 years now? It's incredible. Why do you think that is? What is it about this story that just won't let go?
I think there are a few things at play here. First off, there's just the sheer tragedy of it. A 6-year-old girl, gone. And we still don't know for sure who did it or why. It eats at people.
It's like it could have been anyone's child, And the fact that there's no closure, no justice, it just makes it that much harder to process.
Right. And second, there's the mystery, right? All the twists and turns, all the weird details that don't quite add up. It's like we want to put the pieces together, but the puzzle is just incomplete.
We're all drawn to a good mystery, aren't we? But I think with this one, it's more than that. There's something deeper, something that maybe hits a little too close to home.
I think you're right, because it also taps into these really deep-seated fears, right?
Yeah.
The idea that even in a safe neighborhood with a seemingly perfect family, something this horrible could happen. It makes you question everything.
It makes you realize that no one is truly safe. And that sometimes, even with all the best intentions, the people who are supposed to protect us, they make mistakes. Big mistakes.
And those mistakes, they have consequences. Sometimes really tragic ones.
So yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head. It's the tragedy, it's the mystery, and it's that fear that maybe none of us are really as safe as we think we are.
It's a case that forces us to confront some really uncomfortable truths about ourselves and the world.
And even after all this time, after all the theories and investigations and new technology,
Right.
we're still left with that one burning question. Who killed JonBenét Ramsey?
A question that may never be fully answered.
Maybe not. But we can keep asking it, keep searching, and keep hoping that someday, somehow, the truth will come out.
It's all we can do.
Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. We've covered a lot: the ransom note, the crime scene, the theories, the investigations, the new DNA technology. It's a lot to process,
It really is a case that just pulls you in and doesn't let go.
doesn't it? But that's what makes it so fascinating
Yeah.
and so important, because it reminds us that the search for truth is never easy, and that sometimes, even when we think we have all the answers, we're still left with more questions.
I think that's a good place to leave it.
I did too. So as we close out this deep dive, I want to leave you with this thought. What is it about this case that still sticks with you? What questions are you still wrestling with? And what do you think it says about us as a society that we're still so captivated by this story after all these years? Think about it, talk about it, and keep searching for those answers. You never know what you might find.
That's the beauty of a good mystery. It keeps us thinking, keeps us questioning, keeps us engaged, and who knows, maybe someday one of us will be the one to finally crack the code.
Maybe so. So thank you all for joining us on this journey into the heart of the JonBenét Ramsey mystery. We'll see you next time for another deep dive.